welcome everyone, welcome. I'm Jim Tulip and I'm the MC for this afternoon. Very pleased and feel privileged to have this role. It's a project that's quite close to my heart, as well as the fact that I've got some of the writing in the book that I identify strongly with Eugene and his work. But we're here this afternoon to celebrate the launch of a book, This Tortuous Ridge, Linden to Lawson, edited by Eugene Stockton. And the book is to be launched by Dr Grace Karskens, Associate Professor in the School of Humanities and Languages, University of New South Wales. She is one of the outstanding scholars in colonial history, in urban and environmental history, and cross-cultural history. And it is right in introducing a book so intimately involved with the land that we acknowledge the Darug and the Gundungurra peoples, the traditional custodians of this land. We also pay respect to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present here today. It is therefore our great pleasure to welcome Dr Grace Karskens of the University of New South Wales to launch This Tortuous Ridge, well known to Australian readers as the author of the award-winning book The Colony, A History of Early Sydney, and for her earlier study, The Rocks, Life in Early Sydney. Along with many prizes and awards, Grace Karskens is interested in promoting historical understandings and awareness to wide audiences through writing, film, museums, and online. We could not ask for a better person to respond to and to launch this book. Please welcome Dr Grace Karskens.
That was a lovely introduction, thank you, Jim. Hello everybody, it is so great to be here with you, and I better put my glasses on. There we go. On this very happy and very special occasion, and I didn't know it was Eugene's birthday. Yes! I want to also first acknowledge the traditional owners of this country and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Now, I'm very pleased to have been asked to launch this rather wonderful book. May I wave one around? Yes. Rather wonderful book, This Tortuous Ridge, Linden to Lawson. And I thought I would, Jim's stolen my thunder a little bit, but I will follow on from what you said, because I would like to say a few words about the editor, Eugene Stockton, who is clearly the powerhouse behind this book, along with Allan Walsh. Now, I know you are all aware of the treasure you have with Eugene in your midst. He's an inspirational and irrepressible catalyst for bringing people together, for capturing and spreading the knowledge and spirit of place. You know his contributions, but let me just give words to some key aspects today. I understand from reading about Eugene that his early and abiding fascination with the Aboriginal archaeology of his home country here in the Blue Mountains, I'm going to get that right. It was that led him to pioneer the study of sites and artefacts here in this region. And what he actually did was to show, through patient field work and scientific analysis, that the Blue Mountains were in fact populated by Aboriginal people. Well, we all know that now, don't we? But in the 1960s and 70s, most archaeologists did not. They simply assumed the mountains had repelled Aboriginal people as they had the early white settlers. So in that way, Eugene's work has been particularly groundbreaking in many other ways as well. But put simply, in this case, he made the archaeology of the Blue Mountains and Western Sydney visible in an age when archaeologists' gaze were firmly fixed on the deserts or Tasmania. But Eugene didn't stop with the academic journals, no. He wanted to close the circle and connect this knowledge with places and the wider community of the Central Blue Mountains. And so we have, as Jim mentioned, the Blue Mountains Educational and Research Trust, which he founded, and the many splendid volumes that it has produced, now including this Tortuous Ridge. So I wanted to start with Eugene's life contribution because his fingerprints are all over this volume, all over them. There are big ideas, as Jim mentioned, pulling these excellent chapters together. And one of them is the texture of place that's built up in layers by drawing on different perspectives and disciplines. So the book roams through archaeology, ecology, history, heritage, and more. Now, as a historian who always wants to know everything about a place, I just want to cheer. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. And this holistic way of proceeding is part of the larger themes threaded through the heart of this book. Now, for example, listen to Eugene's opening line. Yes. In the heart of the Blue Mountains of New South Wales is a distinct canton. It's a cluster of 5 villages. Now, that choice of the word canton is really interesting, and I think it's significant because canton refers to an administrative or political area. It originated in 15th century Switzerland, where mountain valleys, yes, were self-identifying, independently minded sovereign cantons of the larger federation. Now, there's all kinds of implications there, but what I also want to say is Eugene thinks of place in another dimension as well. He's interested in the spiritual dimensions of place, as you will know, and the way we are all connected to our places, body and soul. But to plumb that dimension, we need first to understand our places. So, if the Central Blue Mountains is a modern mountain canton, what pulls it together? One answer is the distinctive topography and geology of this island in the Blue Mountains, and the unique ecologies and histories that in turn evolved here as a result. Gil Jones sketches out the geology and topography, the iron vein sandstone that weathers much more slowly here than other mountain areas, and so supports a characteristic scrubby bushland. The wind that strips away the thin soil from the ridge tops and leaves great sandstone platforms bare to the big sky. These are places of heightened drama, which, as Eugene and Kelvin Knox write, became the great ceremonial grounds of Aboriginal people. We are indeed on sacred ground here. Chris Whiteman explores the plants and animals of this area, this extraordinary flower garden. The pictures are beautiful. The sheer range of distinctive vegetation communities, from cliff faces to creek lines, and the way the place is alive with birds and animals. I always wonder when I read this sort of stuff, and I love it, how on earth all those silly English visitors could say the bush was monotonous. They obviously needed to get down out of their carriages and take a proper look. Just as we, today, need to pull over, get out of our cars, breathe the mountain air, maybe not today, walk and look around. John Lowe then follows in the footsteps of early officer William Dawes. John also rescues Dawes from the great condescension of history, which, after the elevation of Blackton, Wilson and Wentworth, branded everybody who explored the mountains before them a failure. As John says, Dawes, like so many others, contributed to a huge amount to the growing store of geographical knowledge and experience, and that is how exploration really works. John Merriman then takes the story up by focusing on the roads that successively scored the mountain ridge, from Cox and his men, Team Cox, to the broad, smooth, black ribbons of the newest sections of the highway today. John also traces the way modern road construction invariably exposes the ghosts of thoroughfares past. Stones cut and laid by generation after generation of men long gone. For the past is with us, right under our feet. 19th century travellers and their draft animals had to stop and rest, eat and drink. And so the earliest white settler landscape was shaped by the natural availability of water and camping places. Eugene's essay on Christmas Swamp, I noticed he's had a bar named after it in the Blue Mountains Hotel. Back to pubs in a minute. His essay on the Christmas Swamp, the swamp that spawned Lawson, is a fine example of the way we can read human and environmental history as one. And this is the way landscapes should be read. The settler landscape was also shaped by how far people and animals could travel in a day. As Elizabeth Burgess and Ken Goodlett explore in their chapters, gradually hotels and other buildings appeared at those favoured campsites and became the nuclei for the later towns of the canton. As the century progressed and ideas about the Blue Mountains were transformed, some people stopped here rather than eternally passing through. They built beautiful retreats for the sake of the fresh air and the refreshment of body and spirit. As Eugene Stockton writes, eventually tourists, holiday makers, honeymooners and day trippers came to see the mountain's sublime sights. Meanwhile, locals busily built the houses, gardens, shops, schools, halls, churches and the organisations of the five towns. And distinctions continued. According to you, evidently Hazelbrook was Methodist and Lawson was Catholic. And how could you tell? According to Eugene, by whether there's a pub or not. Instant marker. Finally, Jim Tulip takes us on an intimate personal tour of the Central Mountains, pointing out the vistas and what you can see from where, and ruminating on the way history is in the landscape, and the landscape is history. Now, as well as all this book is a real visual treat, and I think that's down to Allan as well. Every chapter has splendid pictures, from early colonial paintings to contemporary images of places, buildings, monuments, all places in the heart. Imagine coming upon this book in 100 years' time and seeing how they lived in the olden days, and better still, learning what they cared about. So, I want to congratulate all the authors on their fine work and for producing what is clearly a labour of love and a gift to future generations. And so I hereby declare this tortuous ridge launched into the world.
Eugene, would you like to respond to these?
If I can.
If you can.
First of all, I'd like to thank you. I'm just amazed at the number of people who turned up today, and that's so kind of you to help us launch this book. And I'd like to thank Grace for introducing the book. You know, it was very... I took a gamble when I put out the invitation to Grace to launch our book. So I thought, friends coming all the way from Tasca just to launch a book. But I knew that she had an interest in the various aspects. The work she's done on the Cox's Road, for example, and the work she's now doing on the Independence Lakes area. So, with bated breath, I made the invitation, and I was surprised that she came along with such gusto to do that. Thank you, Grace. I really appreciate that. I'd thank you to Jim too. Jim will always give a very splendid oration, and thank you, Jim, for your gracious words. I'd like to thank particularly Allan Walsh, our printer. He's very professional. He's done a superb job, as he's done with all our books. And in fact, we couldn't get anywhere without his expertise and his enthusiasm. And also the way it's organised today, etc. A man who's got great attention to detail. I find it very satisfying working with Allan, as other authors have. You know, mostly people who write a book, send the manuscript off to a publisher, and hope for the best. But with Allan, it's a continual back and fro between the author and the printer. And poor Sue, every so often I have to ring up, Sue, we can get Allan on the phone, please. I've got to put a comma after that second sentence. So that very detailed, backwards and forwards, endless number of proofs and so on. I really appreciate what you've done, Allan. This whole event started, we wrote a book that's on sale there today, and a second printing, in fact, a book on Sydney Rock. That's that rock at the corner of Summer Street and the highway. Very much a labour of love. But some people in the Hazel were saying, why don't you write about us? I thought, yeah, that's a fair question. In this area of the Central Blue Mountains, we're so used to being, as it were, squeezed in between the Upper Blue Mountains and the Lower Blue Mountains, and it's people feel that they have something distinctive. They're not Upper Blue Mountains, they're not Lower Blue Mountains, they're special. And so it made sense that to explore that identity, explore the place that gives rise to that identity, to give some sort of pride of place. And it was also a chance for me to draw out a very strong conviction I have that it's the particular geology and topology of an area shape the kind of community that will develop there. And hence the name of the book, this Tortuous Ridge. It certainly is very different from other parts of the Blue Mountains. And that Tortuous Ridge has really created a certain type of people, a certain type of mentality. We were tempted at one stage to go and do something fairly encyclopedic, that is, gather together all the information we could about the Central Blue Mountains. That can be pretty weary. And there's always the question, where do you draw a line? So we tried to do something different to bring out the specialness of living here. And I'd like to thank each of the contributors because they caught that message. They communicated something of how they feel about living in the Central Blue Mountains. And so so many people have contributed to this idea that we are special, and that this area makes us feel special. Some people went to extraordinary lengths in their contribution. I was very conscious with each of the writers, some writing with certain difficulties, some finding it hard to get sources and so on. I'd like to pay tribute to Chris Whiteman, for example. Chris went trudging out in the bush to find rare plants, which he was able to photograph, and beautiful photographs of that. As I found from his work on the Sydney Rock, he's indefatigable. Likewise, Allan, he went traipsing up and down the highway and looking for photos and so on. I'd like to thank Brian Fox, for example, who supplied a lot of very important information which didn't actually get into the book but guided the writers in identifying places. Many of the places that they're dealing with have changed their names, and that can be confusing. So Brian gave us a very important diagnostic tool there. And so many of you have contributed to this final product. And I hope that you feel a sense of pride in what you have produced and made available then to the rest of the people who live in this western part of the Blue Mountains.